All right, next up we've got Sean Lewkiw. Hey, Sean.
Hey, how's it going?
Excellent. So give us a little background on yourself.
Well, I've been in the visual effects industry for about 20 years, from way back in the 90s when I started with Prisms and even beta testing Houdini 0.9. So I'm now working as a teacher at Lost Boys in Montreal 3 days a week, and I also work as a CG Supervisor at Cinesite here in Montreal too.
Excellent. So what's today's presentation going to be about?
Today's presentation is called A Pipeline in 13 Lines of Python. Basically, it's a way for a student or a home user to create a pipeline that is similar to a big studio's pipeline. It will really help you organize your files and get you used to working in a studio environment.
Fascinating. Well, let's get started.
Okay, we're ready to go. Let's create our pipeline in 13 lines of Python. Now, there is one little caveat here when I say making a pipeline in 13 lines of Python. We're sort of making a pipeline in 13 lines of Python. We're making a shot environment in 13 lines of Python, and we're also going to add another 13 or so lines of Python for a total of 26 lines of Python if we want the super deluxe one. But we can get away with 13 lines, as you will see. Let's get started. What is it? What are we making? We're making a tool to create a shot directory structure. In the screen grab you see here, we've got a base directory, which is where we want our shots to live. In this case, I'm saying temp my pipeline just for testing purposes. Then over here, we have a list of shots we want to choose from. So either you can create a new shot here, or you can choose from existing shots. And then you can choose the subdirectories you want inside each of those shots. So who needs it? What's it all about? So number one, consistency. All files will be organized the same way, no matter what you're working on. Finding files and folders will be a matter of muscle memory. Portability. You'll be able to work on files at home or at school without having to repath anything, provided you're using the environment variables. Flexibility. You can move to a new machine and or a new directory structure without having to worry about repathing files. And professional development. All studios use a shot environment, so you should just get used to the concept and be comfortable with working in it. You'll also learn, some very basic Python. Another huge advantage of this is if you ever have to zip up some folders to send to somebody or zip up a whole project, you just have to zip up that one shot. You don't have to search and fumble around, try to extract which things are pointing to which geodirectories and where you saved it. You don't want 5,000 HIP files from when you started working Houdini 5 years ago in the same directory with your latest project. So just organizing your shots as if you were in a real studio environment is a great idea. Environment variables. This is the key to get this to work. If you already know what environment variables are, feel free to skip this part, but if you don't, listen up. So what are they? Well, here's a quote. It's a name variable which is used to hold values. Well, that's not very useful, is it? So let's explore it. Because you might be doing this on Windows or you might be doing it on Linux or a Mac, we're going to do it through the text port in Houdini. That's Alt, Shift, and T. We've opened up a text port in Houdini and I type echo $home. So that resolves in home catfish. So my username is catfish and I have a home directory there. Every student in our school has a home directory and it is unique. So if you are writing some code, let's say that you are a Houdini developer and you want to know where to put the preference files, you don't have to figure out where to put them. You just put them in $home and it will put them in the user's home directory. So this portable method will also work if you're on Windows or if you're on Linux or if you're on Mac, because $home will always result in the right thing. Now echo $geo here at Lost Boys, this is where we put our geometry files. So Lost Boys affects students, class 5, catfish, that's me. Capybara is a shot that we're working on at the time, and geo is where we store our geometry files. So it's always the same no matter what shot we're working on. And that's the thing that makes this so useful. Now, if we go here to the shot directory and change the root of where our shots are going to live, and now we're working at home and we're working see my project. Now, if we go here and we do echo $geo, we can see that the value of $geo has changed to reflect the new place where you're storing your geometry files. Now here we can see that in action. Here is a file cache node. And again, at Lost Boys, we have changed the default geometry path to be $geo. Now here you can see that it's set to my projects. At Lost Boys, this is a typical directory structure that you'll see. So if you dive inside one of those directories, you'll see the exact same thing as you would if you dive inside any of the other directories. We are going to be using both Python and Hscript. Hscript is an older, simpler language similar to C Shell. It's been around for more than 20 years. So that means if you learn Hscript, you've essentially learned C Shell. It's great for quick one-liners. It's faster than Python. It's more compact. Most H commands have a Python equivalent if you want to port it over to Python at any point, but it is very limited in its abilities. It's very poor at string manipulation. So Python is a modern language. It's the most popular language in visual effects shops. It is slower and it's more verbose than Hscript. It is harder to learn, but it is a full-featured programming language, so it's well worth taking the time to learn it. So let's just go ahead and do it. So the first thing we need to think about is what we want a program to do. Don't just sit down at the keyboard and start banging away like a chimpanzee. Think about what you want to do, maybe even sketch out what you want the interface to look like. One really nice thing about working with Houdini digital assets is you can sort of sketch out the entire interface without it actually doing anything. It's so easy to create interfaces, and the interface should tell the story of what you want your utility to do. So this will allow users to change the root of their project. It will allow users to choose the shot they are working on. It will allow users to make new shots. The utility will create the directories when necessary, and it will create the necessary environment variables. Okay, so why don't we just go ahead and get started. As you can see, I've moved to the technical desktop here, and I've hidden almost all the windows except for the Python shell, and I've got my object level up here. And if I hit P, I can see the parameter interface. So here's my existing tool, and we want to build one from scratch. Let's start with a subnetwork. I'm going to immediately turn this into a digital asset. Okay, so we'll say create digital asset. I'm going to call this my cool pipeline, and we'll say accept. Okay, so then it pops open the edit type properties, and we can start creating our interface. So the first thing we want to do here is you can see in my subnet, we can see this interface transform subnet. We don't need to see that because that will just confuse us. So we'll just say invisible and apply, and now it's gone. Okay, so let's start by building the chooser that's going to allow us to choose the base directory. The base directory is going to be the root of our projects. So if we go here to a parameters tab, we can go down here to a string, and a string is basically just a word. The name of this channel is going to be BD for base directory. We're going to put in a label called base directory. Okay, and I'm going to say apply, and you can see that that brings up this string. So we can put anything we want in here, but of course, that is not a very convenient way to choose a directory. We're going to change that to a file directory, and we'll say apply, and now we can choose a directory. Okay, now let's say that I want my file structure to live in my home directory. I'm going to create a new folder called my pipeline. I'm not saying this is a great place to put it, but just for the sake of argument here, that's where we're going to put it. So I'm just going to copy that, because you'll notice that this is in bold, meaning that these are not the defaults, and it kind of might bug you to see this always in bold as not being the default. So I'm going to put that in there, and now hit apply, and now you'll notice it's not in bold, meaning this is the default. So if I remove that and I right click and say revert to defaults, it will bring it back. So there's our base directory. So the next thing we want to do is we look at the existing one. We have a button here that says do it. So let's put that in there now. This is the one that's going to actually, do it. So drag the button in there, and we're going to call that one do it. So I hit the button, and of course nothing happens. That is of course because it isn't connected to anything. It's just a button that you could push, to the end of time, and nothing's going to happen. But you notice here there is a callback script, and that's what we want to use. And here we can choose from Hscript or Python. We're going to choose Python because we're writing a Python script. So go to the scripts tab, go here to the custom scripts, and choose Python module, and it creates this empty Python module. So now we go back to the parameters and we point it to that Python module. Now there's no way to actually choose it from this interface. You just have to know this. It's who.phm and then open and close brackets. And then the function you want to call. I'm going to make a function in a sec called init. Right now, we'll see what happens when I press this. I go do it, and I get this error. It says attribute error module object has no attribute init, meaning there's no definition here called init. So it's really good idea to start getting used to seeing these errors and trying to figure out what they mean. So let's put in the definition called init. So we're going to say def init, and we'll put an open and close bracket. If there were any arguments to this, this is where they would go. And I hit enter, and then I hit tab, and I'm going to say print open bracket, hello world. Okay, now you notice if you've used Python before, you might not be used to this new way of the print statement with Python 3 point whatever it is. This is the way you should be writing print from now on. So make sure your print statements are formatted like this, or at some point in the future, they're going to fail. Okay, so now if we press the button, what happens? Well, if you look here in the Python shell, you can see that hello world is printed. So we now know that our little program's working properly. So we can print hello world to our heart's content. But actually what we really want is we don't want to print hello world. We want to grab the value of this. So we want to know, hey, where the heck is the root of this pipeline? Now we could actually just hard code this into our script, but we want the ability to change this wherever we want. So we're going to make sure that we can grab that. But before we do that, let's just add a few more things to this. So we've got the base directory. I'm just going to hit D in here. That's going to duplicate it. And it's called base directory again. If I go apply, it looks exactly the same. We're going to rename this. We're going to call this shot. And we'll just rename this shot. Hit apply. So now it says shot, but we don't want the same defaults. We're going to say the default is shot A. Or the default is nothing, doesn't matter. But for now, we'll leave it shot A. And this isn't a great way to choose the shots because you're going to have to navigate around, et cetera, et cetera. We're going to right click and revert to defaults. So we're going to come back and we're going to fix this later. But for now, let's just say that we'll type in the shots, but we're going to add a feature so that we can choose the shots from this drop down here in a minute. Okay, and the last thing we want, if we look at the one that I've already done, is we want a list of all the subdirectories we want to create. So I'm going to add another string here, and this is just going to be a list of the subdirs. So I'm going to call this subd sub. Okay, so these are all the dirs that are going to live under that shot. Apply, and let's look at that. Oops, here's the one we're working on. So right now there's nothing in there. Let's say there's geo, hip, render. Okay, you can add as many as you want. I'm going to copy that. Again, I'm going to make those the defaults. Okay, so apply. And we have geo, hip, and render. Okay, so click, we got our hello world, so everything's working fine. Okay, so the next thing we want to do, obviously, is use all this information in our script. So let's go back to our scripts tab, and we will just comment out this hello world part, because we don't necessarily need that to happen anymore. I'm going to put a couple things at the top here. I'm going to say import who, and I'm going to say import OS. Okay, who is the library of functions, definitions that we're going to use to interact with Houdini. And we're also going to import OS, which are the system functions so that we can query the file system. The first thing we want to do is if we want to know the name of the node that we're working on. This node could be subnet 1, it could be called foo, it could be called anything. We have to be able to tell Houdini what's the name of the node we're working on so that we can grab these parameters from it. This is something you'll do all the time. I'm going to say n equals who.node, open bracket, open quote, dot. There we go. So n equals who.node dot. So dot means this node. So why don't we just put in a print n. Now you notice that I'm not putting in quotes because I'm not literally trying to write a word. I'm trying to write the value of n here. So the value of n is what? Let's find out. And you can see that it's foo, and which is exactly the name of this node. So that is working like a charm. Okay, so now we know the name of the node. Now what we want to do is we want to get the root value. We want to know what the value of this is. So we're going to use an eval statement. So I'm going to say root. I'm going to put this all in caps so it's easy to find later. I say n, the name of the node. So my foo dot parm. So get me a parm from this node, a parameter, which is one of these things. And I want to get the bd parameter, which is this. And that points us to it, but we need to evaluate it, eval, and that will get us the value. Now let's put down print root. Okay, apply and go do it. And you can see, whoop, so I put root in quotes, which was a mistake. So let's get rid of those quotes because it was literally printing root. We want the value of root. Okay, apply and do it. And now you can see that it's properly grabbing that value there. Cool, so everything's working fine. So we also want to get the value of shot and subdirs. So let's just copy that line, call that, we'll say shot. And what was that? That was called shot, and that's called subd. So we'll say shot, and again, we'll call this subd. And that's called subd. Apply. Okay, and we'll hit do it. And it's good to hit this every once in a while because if you write a whole bunch of code and then you haven't executed it for a while and there's some problem, you press do it again and it breaks and you won't know where the heck it broke. So now we know the root, the shot, and the subds. We want to make sure that these directories exist, and if they don't exist, we want to make them. So the first thing we want to do is we want to say, does this shot directory exist? But first we need to know the root is here and the shot is here, but we have to make these into a path. We want this path to work on Windows or on Mac or on Linux. So we'll use this built-in OS function. We're going to say root shot. So it's a combination of the root and shot equals os.path.join. This function here will nicely join the root and shot together to create us a portable path to directory that will work on any operating system. So we'll say root, comma, shot. Let's print root shot just to see if it's working. And I'll say apply and accept. And let's see, so home catfish documents my pipeline shot A. Yahoo, it is working. Now what we need to do is go through this list of subdirectories and create those. So we're going to do a for each loop because we've got a list of subdirectories and we want to go through each one at a time. So we're going to say for D in sub D, print D. I'm just using D here as the current directories. As we go through this loop, the first time we're in the loop, the value of D is going to be geo. The second time we're in the loop, it's going to be hip. And the third time we're in the loop, it's going to be render. Okay, so that's how a for loop works. So let's go apply and do it. And you can see it's kind of working. So we've got, you can see here, we got a G, we got an E, we got an O, a space. So it's literally going through this thing one letter at a time, which is not quite what we want. We want it to break on these spaces. So there's a simple way to do that. I'm going to say split, open and close bracket. So it's going to split on the white space. If you check on the internet, there's different ways to split things, but for our purposes, that will work perfectly. Geo, hip, and render. Yahoo, it's working. Let's go ahead and create those directories if they don't exist. We're going to say path equals os.path.join. We want to join the root shot, which is the root and the shot, with the current directory. Okay, so let's print path and just make sure it's all working. Apply, do it. And you can see here that it's going to create my pipeline shot A geo, hip, and render. Yahoo. So that's exactly what we want it to do. So let's get rid of these print statements. And let's say, okay, if these directories don't exist, then create them. So we'll say, if they don't exist, os.path.exists path. So in other words, if this path here does not exist, then do something, colon, and then again, the tab. We'll say os.makeDirs, and we'll say path, and apply. Okay, so let's see what happens. Do it, and hopefully it's made those directories. So we can now take a look. Do those directories exist? Shot A, and there's our directories. So it worked perfectly. So let's call this shot B. Do it, and let's see if those directories exist. Shot B, yeah. Okay, so let's go back to shot A. I'm going to right click and say, oops, revert to default. Do it. So it doesn't complain because it says if these don't exist, make them. If they do exist, don't do anything. So this little bit of code here is going to get us our default directory structure. But what it's not going to do is give us the environment variables that we want. So let's go on and see how we do that. If we want to look at environment variables, the easiest way to do it is if you have Alt Shift and T, it brings up the Hscript text port, and we can say echo $home. Oops. So I use the up arrow key to bring up the last command, and you notice I accidentally put a W on the end, so I'm just going to get rid of that. What if we want to see all of the environment variables that Houdini knows about? Okay, so we can just type set. So some of these things are things that it's inherited from the shell, and some of them are just built into Houdini via various mechanisms. But you can see one of them is the hip file name, the hip name, job, etc., etc. We can add some more environment variables to this. We want to, for example, add geo, hip, and render. How do we do that? You'll notice that when we say set, that actually lists these environment variables, which is a bit strange considering this is called set. But let's say we know that we want to set in environment variables. How can we do this? The easiest way to do this is through Hscript. So here I am looking at Hscript. How do I know what possible way there is to set an environment variable? Hscript has a lot of help online, but if you do help, you get millions of these functions that are available. How do you even know where to begin? So you say help -k, and I know the word environment is going to be in there. So I'm going to hit ENV, and I can see, here we go. Here's some stuff that has the word environment in it. Now, that's a lot less to read than this huge list. So I can start to go through it and go, oh, okay, well, actually, I think, this one looks promising. And indeed, this is it. It's called set env. And that's the one we're going to use. So I say help set env, and it tells us how to use it. We're going to create a command here. Command equals, we'll put this in quotes, set. We want geo to be equal to home, my pipeline, yada, 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 yada. We want to say set env percent equals percent. Oops, percent, sorry, s equals percent s. Then we put a percent here. What's going to happen is when we run this, it's going to replace this percent and this percent with the two arguments we give it here. So we're going to say, whoops, this CMD should be inside the for loop. So I'm just going to X that and make sure that our spacing is correct. So we want to say that D, which is the current subdirectory we're going through. So we'll say D equals the path. So let's print CMD just to see what that's doing, just to make sure it's working. So it's going to set and geo equals home catfish documents pipeline, yada, yada, yada. Hip equals home catfish documents, my pipeline shot A, hip, etc., etc. So that's exactly what we want it to do. If we actually type that in a shell here, let's do exactly that. And then type set, you can now see that over here we have geo, there it is. It's set for us. Okay, cool. So let's build that in. So we got the CMD here, but you'll notice that this is a Hscript command. It's not a Python command. So how do we use this Hscript command in Python? We use who.hscript CMD apply. Okay, so what we're doing here, we've created the path to the subdirectory, and then we're saying, okay, give me an environment variable that's the name of this subdirectory that is equal to the path to that thing. So we're doing that no matter what, whether the directories exist or not. If they don't exist, then we make the directories. So let's say apply and do it. And let's type in our shell here. Oops. Let's type set. And here we go. We've got our geo, we got our hip, and we've got our render directories all set for us via this script. Okay, so let's just accept that. And for example, now if you go into your geometry directory, or you create some geometry and you put down a file cache, now here at Lost Boys, you can see that as I already went through it, we have set geo, this is an environment variable. If I click on it, you can see that geo now resolves as home catfish documents, my pipeline shot A, yada, yada, yada. So if I just go ahead and reset the environment variable geo to be pointing to something else, so if we can go back into my pipeline building tool here, I'm going to change it to temp foo. That's where some bizarre place I want to store my whole file structure. Do it. Okay. So now if we go into here, so if we click on this, we can now see that it's pointed temp foo shot A. So it's doing exactly what we told it to do. Okay, so we're getting close to completion. And one thing I want to fix though, before we go on, is I want to change the way we choose our shots. Because right now, if you want to choose a shot, you go through this chooser here. Let's say we want to go to shot B. Okay, we say accept, and we got shot B there, but obviously we have to get rid of all this junk at the beginning. And that's not a very nice way to use the interface. So let's make it so that we can choose from a list of existing shots here, or we can just type in the name of a new shot here. How are we going to do that? So let's bring up the type properties again. We're going to change this from file directory to just being a normal old string. We'll say apply. And now you'll notice that little chooser thing is gone and the directory chooser is gone as well. Let's go here to the menu tab, parameters, channels, menu, and say use a menu. We're going to change that to be a replace field in single selection menu, and we'll say apply. Okay, so now we'll be able to type in the name of the new shot, or we'll be able to choose from a list of existing shots. So right now, of course, that's empty because we haven't told it where to find those existing shots. Instead of typing in menu items, so we can say A here, and then we could do something like this, and we can choose A from this menu. Obviously, you don't want to do that because you'd have to maintain that manually. So we're going to use a menu script. I'm going to rush through this really quickly because we are out of time. I'm going to just copy the code from my other node and just put it in here. And I'll just go through it really quickly. So we're importing the OS. We're getting the name of the node as we did before. We're getting the name of the project as well, which is right here, just as we did in the other node. Then I initialize a list called a menu item, and I initialize that list to be empty. Then I go and I list all the directories under this project file. OS list dir lists only directories and not files. So then I go through that list, that dir list, and as I'm going through that list, D represents the current directory in that list. We don't want to look at directories that start with dots because those are hidden directories or hidden files, which 99.99% of the time you don't want to see. So if it does not start with a dot, then we go on and do something. If it does start with a dot, we'll just skip it. So if it exists and it's in the right place, add it to the menu. We have to do that twice because, as you noticed when it was on the menu items, we have to say the label and the value. And then after we've done that, we just sort it alphabetically and then we return it. And now if I go here, we'll see the list of the shots that already exist. And if I want to make a new shot, goop, I go do it. And if I go back here, now it's going to list goop as well. Okay, after doing a little bit of testing on Windows, we found that we had a problem with the path. You'll notice here that I am creating my initial path by saying /temp/pipeline. When the os.path.join function is called, it will join the rest of the path parts together with backslash. And it seems that Windows does not like this combination of forward slashes and backslashes. There are many different ways to fix this, some more tedious than the other, but in the essence of trying to get this demonstration done in a short period of time, we're just going to take what might be a mangled path here with forward and backslashes, and we're going to fix it after the fact. Here we have the path. I'm going to replace backslashes with forward slashes. Okay, so when I put that in, you think that this replace function should replace the backslash with forward slash, but we've got a problem here. You notice that everything after this backslash is now green, meaning that Python seems to think this is one line that I'm trying to continue, or I've done something wrong. And you can see that in action. If I hit do it, the program is broken. So here's the problem. The backslash is a special character that's designed to protect the character that's after it so that it is treated differently. So normally, your single quote is supposed to end the quote. This is the beginning of the quote. That's the end of the quote. But if we protect it with this backslash, it means no. I don't want to end the quote. I want literally for you to put a single quote into this string. So what we have to do is protect that with another backslash. So if I put in another backslash, and now it's saying, no, this backslash is really a backslash. That's what I want in here. I don't want to use it to protect the single quote. So now if I say apply and do it, you can see that it works. It's not the most elegant way to fix it, but it is the most expedient way to fix it at this point. We are almost finished. We just want to do a few more things. Let's make it so that you have this quick jump menu in all your file browsers in Houdini. And to do this is super easy. You just go to your home, Houdini, whatever version you're in, and add a jump.pref file. And in that file, you literally put the things you'd like to be able to jump to. It can either be an environment variable or actually a full path. Again, if you don't remember where your home directory is, just open a text port and type echo $home. And you'll have this beautiful jump menu next time you restart Houdini. If you want to have your pipeline utility or digital asset available whenever you open Houdini, you can modify the 123.cmd file. So when Houdini starts, it sources the 123.cmd file and it does whatever is specified in that file. So you can copy the 123.cmd file out of the Houdini install directory and you can put it in your home directory in the Houdini scripts directory. That will be sourced instead when you open Houdini. In this case, I'm adding my digital asset. Now, if you want to know the name of your digital asset, you would just middle click on it. If you're having any trouble with this, you can always add this line to your 123.cmd file, message, and whatever message you want, and it will pop up this little dialog for you. And that's it. You're finished. Thank you for listening this far. If you have any questions, feel free to mail me at lewkiw@gmail.com. If you have any questions about Lost Boys, contact at lostboysstudios.com. Thanks again to Lost Boys and to Cinesite. And until next time.